What I would like to do is I would like all of you to take out your phones right now. Do it. Take out your phones. Everyone in the back, come here. Come to the front. Fill in these seats. Take out your phones. Pull up the app and download the National Pulse. You will not regret it. What I will say to you is, Raheem told me, he said, Shmuley, I promise you, this app is a game changer. And guess what? He wasn't right. And yes, he gave me a very stereotypical ethnic nickname, not realizing it's actually my middle name. He also makes fun of my skinny ties, but I digress. The slogan for the National Pulse is radically independent. It comes from the fact that the National Pulse did not take big dollar donations. It does not rely on billionaires or corporations. It actively refuses political campaign involvement. And again, this is what corporate media does. Now, without further ado, I would like all of you to stand up, and give a round of applause to my dear friend, London's finest, Raheem Kassam.
Thank you, Shmuley. It's very funny. When I first met Alex, I just looked at him and we had a chat, and I said to him, you know what? I'm going to call you Shmuley. And he said, wow, that is deeply, deeply anti-Semitic. And about 2 weeks later, he said to me, listen, I got to tell you the truth. I said, what is it? He said, my middle name is actually Shmuel. So, as I always like to say, nailed it. But thank you for that very kind introduction, and thank you for plugging the National Pulse app. It is something that we are incredibly pleased with. We often beat the corporate media to the best and biggest news stories of the day, and you get them without a globalist tinge. So if you will join us, it is free. We provide that to you as a free service. I got to tell you, I bloody love this club. I really do. Every single time I get to be invited to this club, I drop everything, no matter where I am. And in the last couple of weeks, it's been London, it's been Clacton, it's been Paris, and it's been Milwaukee. All the best spots in the world. And when Gavin extended the invite for me to come here and give you guys a briefing on what I'm seeing out in the real world right now, out in the nationalist, populist fight against the globalists, again, I dropped everything to come and speak with you guys. So I'm grateful that so many of you are here. I'm grateful to speak on the same platform as my good pal, Jack Posobiec. I do use promo code Tanya, though, so... But as much as we enjoy each other's company, as much as we enjoy sharing a drink, sharing a laugh, sharing a dinner together, there are 104 days left until November the 5th. And it's your election day. Or should I call it your snap election day? Except perhaps instead of like in the UK and in France, it's not a snap election date, but it's a snap candidate that we're facing now. And I said something on a podcast 2 weeks ago when I came back from the UK and France, and I want to read this to you as a quote, quoting myself, of course, in true Raheem fashion. A great man once said, I said, it's all very important to what happens in November. I think you have to be very careful here, especially of the Biden stuff, because you had a snap election in the UK and you had a snap election in France. That's the theme. That's the globalist theme for 2024, and I just would not be surprised, do not put it past them, to watch Joe Biden die on his feet in front of the American public. Maybe not literally in front, but literally to pass away a week, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks before an election, and boom, then boom. It's a snap election. It's a snap candidate. It's somebody different. And then you have the sympathy vote. Go and look at that. Go and look at the Goldwater blowout again if you need reminding of that. The sympathy vote can take enough away from the moderates and the independents and give a lot to the people who are going to stay at home and not vote for Biden. Suddenly they think, oh, It's a different situation. Think about that. That was 2 weeks ago. And think about all the things that we've been through in the last 2 weeks alone. You know, another great man used to love to come to this club, and I'm sure he'll be back at this club again. In fact, I'm going to lobby for it to be the first place he comes back again when he is released from jail in Danbury, Connecticut. That man is Stephen K. Bannon, one of my oldest standing friends and mentors in this movement. There are 104 days left until November the 5th. And one of the last times that I actually stood in this building amongst some of you, I'm sure you remember it, was when Stephen K. Bannon and I came up here. I think we were up at the solarium, because I insisted that I had to be able to smoke all night. There's no smoking up there now, by the way, Jane. Just FYI, you know, I had to let people know. You can't do that anymore. Very naughty. I definitely didn't just go and do it. But we went up there, and Steve and I gave a presentation. Was anybody there at the time? Gavin, obviously, was there. Here we are, you know, how many years later? And we said, here's how they're going to steal the election in 2020. Here's the Transition Integrity Project. Here's how they're actually walking us through the mail-in ballots, the drop boxes, COVID, all of the excuses. We warned you in advance it was going to happen. We warned you in advance that you would get a Manchurian candidate and they would weekend at Bernie's style install him for the next 4 years. Everything we warned about has come to pass. And the red wave complacents, and we all know them, and maybe there are some in this room, who should have been eating crow after that moment, instead turned on Donald Trump and turned on the MAGA movement. And we all know people like that too. Fast forward 4 years, and guess who's back? The same complacents, the same rhinos, the same never or hardly ever Trumpers who suddenly saw the light. What was it? Was it the indictments? Some of them came back for the indictments. And when the lawfare crooks in this city and in this state came after Donald Trump. And let's not forget a big shout out to the ones who only came back in the last 10 days. Just think about it. When the unthinkable almost happened. Just 10 days ago in Butler, Pennsylvania, when the 45th President of the United States took a bullet to the head by somebody who was radicalized by the corporate mainstream media and by the globalist left, and indeed by the state, by your country, by your government. My warning today, just like when we did the warnings of the Transition Integrity Project, my warning today, bless you, is to refuse to heed the complacents. We all feel quite good about this cackling moron that the Democrats are going to end up with, but you have to understand, the only reason they feel assured in putting a cackling moron in place is the same reason they felt assured with putting a cadaver in place in 2020. Because they don't intend to play by the book. So we can be 2 points up in the polls. We could be 5 points up in the polls. We could be 10 points up in the polls. Do not heed the complacents. Because, number one, you know that if they could fool us into complacency, and they did in 2020, then they would do it again, and they are again. I guarantee you this. I live it and breathe it every single day for my sins, and in fact, for all of you on Capitol Hill. I have to live there, unfortunately. And because they've shown us over the past 8 years, 10 years, some would say, some would go back even further, that you can put nothing past them. The hoaxes, the lawfare, an illegitimate president of an illegitimate regime, that has put their political opponents behind bars. Our friends, Dr. Peter Navarro, our friend, Stephen K. Bannon, a long-standing supporter, one of the greatest supporters of this club, is currently behind bars. So Gavin, you're next. But I'm also not just here. I don't want to just give you this little roundup and this little rah-rah about what you need to do in November, your duty in November. So many of you I know are already putting your shoulders to the wheel. So many of you actually show me every day how it's done. This club, its members, its leadership, Vish Bora, Gavin Wax, Alex, Chelsea, Nathan, the whole crowd. You guys inspire us, and you guys inspire us to come here and deliver to you the goods about what's really going on in that swamp. But I'm also here just briefly to actually bring you some maybe what you might find surprising good tidings from what I saw happen in the UK and in France. And I know a lot of the media coverage of it was, oh, Marine Le Pen got blown out, what an embarrassment, the left took that election, look at how well democracy works. I remember Emily Maitlis of the BBC celebrating in the immediate aftermath of what they called a defeat of Marine Le Pen, and she was celebrating until somebody said to her, you know who Jean-Luc Mélenchon is, don't you? And you know what the communists in Paris stand for, don't you? And she suddenly started deleting many of her tweets and said, oh my goodness, I didn't actually know. This is who these people are. You know, weapons-grade morons. But the achievement that Nigel Farage, another great supporter of this room and this club, the achievements he made in landing 5 members of parliament is actually unprecedented for the populist right in the United Kingdom. It is, as he likes to call it, a bridgehead into that parliament, an ability for them to go in there every day and represent their constituents as 645 other members of parliament flat out refuse to do every day. Oh, they're more than happy to fight on behalf of the World Economic Forum. They're more than happy to fight on behalf of the big corporates, the big banks, big media, big pharma. But so rarely do they fight on behalf. And I was so pleased to see today Nigel Farage gave his maiden speech in Parliament. And what was the first thing he talked about? His constituents in Clacton. A wonderful little, if you ever get a chance, a wonderful little seaside town in the east of England. Has it seen better days? Yes. Some of us have all seen better days. But £1.55 for a pint of Ruddles at the pub on the seafront, I'll tell you, you can have a wonderful time there. But that's the difference between us and them. And I don't invent this us and them narrative. You hear it all the time coming from the left. This is what sets us apart. This is what sets us apart. I'll tell you what sets us apart is a love for our neighbor and a love for our countries. That is what sets us apart. And what happened at 10 o'clock that evening when exit polls came down? I was standing there. Stuart, Nigel Farage's official photographer, is in this room. Give him a round of applause. Possibly the man with the hardest job in politics, which is trying to photograph Nigel Farage without a pint in his hand. But what did we see that night as the exit polls came out in Clacton, Stuart? The Reform Party is projected to win 13 seats in this parliament. And of course, over the course of the night, we found out that actually it was probably going to be more like 4. And by the next morning, we realized we had gotten 5. Whose expectations were they that were not met? It wasn't the Reform Party's expectations. It wasn't Reform voters' expectations. It wasn't Nigel Farage's expectations. These were confected expectations built up by the corporate media in order to depress us all. In order for us to think, oh my goodness, we're losing again. I don't see it that way at all. 5 members of parliament is not nothing. And 5 members of parliament gives him the opportunity to go in there and to look at the Conservative Party, the feckless rhino Conservative Party, in the face and say, 5 will become 50 in the next parliament. 50 will become 500 if the populist nationalists get their way. And that, my friends, is the way to do it. It is the way to do it. And he has always led the way. And it's the same thing in France. Who raised the expectations for Marine Le Pen, for the Rassemblement National? Did they hope that they could do better? Of course, we all hope that. But were they the ones going out there and saying, oh, well, we're obviously going to be the majority, we're obviously going to be governing, we're obviously going to get the prime ministership? No. Once again, it was the media, the polling companies, the globalist left, raising the expectations falsely. And I have to say something about that. She added another 50 deputies to the French Assembly. It's huge, by the way. And she is the largest single party in the French Assembly. The rest is all coalitions. It's all cobbled together. You get the Greens coming together with the Islamists, coming together with the Communists, coming together with Emmanuel, spawn of Satan, Macron. And I know I've got to wrap up very shortly, but I'd love to tell you a little story about when I first ever met Emmanuel Macron. And nobody had ever heard of him at the time. And I kept reading little nuggets about him in Politico, and I thought to myself, somebody is planting these stories here. Well, I was having lunch one day at an old restaurant no longer there in Westminster called Shepherd's with none other than Nigel Farage, and I told him over the lunch, I said, this Macron guy, they're setting him up. He's the Antichrist. They're setting him up to be the next president of France. Well, obviously, we had what we call a PFL, a proper Farage lunch. And I trot back down the street, and I'm walking past this Indian-French restaurant called the Cinnamon Club, and down the steps towards me comes this diminutive little man. And you know when Raheem is calling you diminutive, you've got real problems, okay? Comes walking down the steps towards me. He's got a tiny little entourage, and I tap the little man on his shoulder. And he turns around and he goes, yes, you know, how the French do. And I said, you're Emmanuel Macron. He goes, yes, yes, thank you, thank you. Sorry to any French in the room. Actually, I'm not sorry to any French in the room. Do I have to rap? I'm just getting started. And I said, I was just at lunch with Nigel Farage. And he takes a step back and he goes, oh. I said, I told him I think you're going to be the next president of France. He says, oh, thank you very much, thank you very much. I said, hold on. I didn't say it was going to be a good thing. And literally, he turned on his heel and marched off in the other direction. Ladies and gentlemen, I am always, always honored to be amongst such amazing friends as I know I have in this room. And I'm always, always honored that you would host me here, and Gavin, that you would have us here at the New York Young Republican Club. And if I could paraphrase from 10 days ago, the final message that I want to leave you today, if I can actually just quote the 45th President of the United States, and I want you to all do it with me, ladies and gentlemen. Fight, fight, fight. Thank you.
Another round of applause for Raheem Kassam, everybody. Very happy to call him a friend of the club, and I can also tell you the story he just told about Emmanuel Macron is 100% true. He's told it to me before. He